it.
Oh, wow, these are deep chairs, man. Look at this.
I'm comfortable, are you?
Yeah. All right, so let's see. Where should we start, Ben? Should we?
How many people are familiar with True Classic? Let's start there for a second. How many have heard about us? How many have bought our shirts before? Ooh, look at that. Gotta work on conversion rates.
Give a coupon code.
I know, mid-funnel. Yeah, I guess maybe I'll just start with just a quick overview, just so everybody's familiar with the brand. So we started back in 2019 with a pretty simple idea of let's empower everybody to look good and feel good. And we thought about delivering on that by developing the clothing that they wear every day, right? And it started really with the idea of let's create the best freaking t-shirt in the world. One that fits you great, feels great, offered at a good price point. And we really didn't expect back then that this would turn into what it did. And I'm speaking on behalf of our 3 founders. And the product market fit was insane. And what we have done over the past, now we're on the 4th year, is expanded very rapidly across 3 key areas of business, which are product, market, channel. So on product, we expanded from being a t-shirt brand to being a full apparel brand, offering 15 plus categories. On market, we moved from being a US brand to being a global brand. We're shipping to over 190 markets worldwide. And on channel, we moved from being a website on Shopify to being omni-channel with an app, Facebook, Instagram shops, TikTok shop, Shopify shop app, Amazon, our own retail, looking into other partnerships and wholesale and marketplaces and things like that. So I think we have, one other thing that's really important about us too is that we're bootstrapped. We never raised money, and it's only been about reinvesting the profit into the brand that enabled us to grow super fast and doing it sustainably. And I think it's all about growth, but I would say in this day and age, it's all about profitable growth. And that's the shift that we're all going through as an industry, I would say, over the past few years.
I feel weird sitting in this chair. I'm going to sit up a little bit. Okay, so I think profitable growth is a good theme for today. I feel like whenever we've talked or I've heard you talk, I've always loved the way that you think about profitable growth. It's it's growth, but it's manageable growth. It's not burn money in the bank growth. It's burn the money that we have coming in growth. And so, could you just talk about how you think about when your media buyer comes to you and says, what's my monthly budget or what's my monthly revenue target? How do you answer that question?
Okay, I'll try to give everybody kind of like a framework. It's a mouthful, but the North Star, in my opinion, for any e-com brand should be marginal, incremental, contribution profit. Hear me out for a second. Marginal, it's about that last dollar that you're spending, not the average. And those tend to be very different, right? So if you're asking a question like, I want more money, how much extra are you going to generate on that last $10,000, $50,000? What is going to be that marginal performance? Incremental. I love Triple Whale and Northbeam and all the guys, but it's not a good way to make decisions on how much to spend, where to spend. You need to really understand, had I not spent that money, what would come anyways? What's the baseline, right? You've got to run those control, exposed experiments to understand what is the causal relationship there. And then contribution profit, I'm sure everybody in this room is focused on either CAC or ROAS. This is how this industry is working, but we have to shift, right? We have to shift to contribution profit. So think about it from the top down, from revenue. First thing after that, discounts, right? Shout out to the Fandu guys as an example for alternative ways to keep more of that line in-house and look into cash back, who, by the way, congrats, just got acquired by Postscript, so that's amazing. Let's give them a shout, by the way, for a pretty awesome business, right? But this is an example. Keep going lines by lines. Payment processing fees, right? Everybody's like, hey, let's just enable them all. Well, do you know how much they all charge you? And when you run your A/B test, do you take into account the payment processing fee by payment provider to know not only is it okay or even, but like, is it net positive on contribution profit? If not, if it's a break even, but it's a more expensive payment processor, kill it. Keep going, pick and pack on fulfillment. Okay, what's going on there? Do you do bundles? If so, can you pre-bundle at source so that you have less items to pick? Keep going, outbound shipping. Okay, what's going on there? Who are the carriers? How can you renegotiate all those rate cards? Returns, exchanges, right? Those vary. If it's a first-time customer, they may return at a higher rate. If it's a repeat customer or maybe a particular category, there may be more lower rates or more favorable scenarios. Factor that into your acquisition. So you go line by line, and then you go down to like, okay, what is that contribution profit? Now you get that part, and it's hard, by the way. Most brands don't have their pulse on it. We also work still on refining our measurement because there's a lot of estimates and assumptions around that. Once you have that, you start moving all your metrics to focus on contribution profit. So instead of focusing on CAC and ROAS, you start looking at contribution profit per customer. On the acquisition front, break even would mean it's 0. And then if you think about retention, you start looking at the cumulative contribution profit per customer, which is essentially the actual LTV. Then you move on, you say like if you're doing CRO and everybody looks at CVR, some people look at RPS, right, like revenue per session. Look at contribution profit per session or gross profit per session instead. If you're looking at any order metrics, look at the contribution profit per order. If you're slicing and dicing your business by channels, by markets, by you name it. So that laser focus can be overstated. And as simple as it sounds, it actually starts shedding a light on like how can you drive profitable growth. What we are striving to do is stay basically there's 3 high-level constraints on business growth in my opinion. There is capacity, there is efficiency, and there is cash. On capacity, it's all about operations, right? Like, is your 3PL, can they fulfill all those orders if you were to give it to them? Do you have customer support, flexibility, and like flexing up and down on your ticket counts? Do you have the inventory to support that? And if not, can you replenish how quickly? So that's capacity. Efficiency is what we all talk about all day, every day, right? How efficient is this growth? If you were to spend extra $1,000, what would you get? Is it worth it or not? Marginal incremental contribution profit. And then on cash, it's just something we all need to manage, especially if you're a bootstrap, which is if you're running out of cash, you're out of business. And so this is just this constant thing that you have to manage and make sure that you are not looking just on profitability, but also looking on your cash flows. The nice thing about doing those things efficiently is that it's very cash efficient, right? So we strive to acquire customers at the break even, at the very least, to maximize growth above that. And then the profit comes really from repeat.
And when you talk about break even, that's not CAC equals AOV. That's CAC equals profitable contribution margin.
Correct. Contribution profit equals CAC is the 0 contribution profit per customer break-even point. And that's why it's so important to understand all the cost line items, including the ones you don't see on day one. That's why I'm saying returns and exchanges. Those are real costs, refunds, right? Real costs for the business. What are they on average? Make sure you discount that upfront on day one, considering the fact that those will come, it's just delayed. So almost like accrue upfront the expected returns, the expected exchanges, the associated costs, whether it's CX tickets or shipping labels that you might be funding. But really have a good pulse on your business to understand what is this order actually doing for me.
Why didn't you guys raise money?
We don't like people telling us what to do.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think this was the founder's decision as well. We love moving really fast. I do think that boards slow you down. I also think there's a lot of different opinions that start getting into the room, which might be exactly in the best interest of the business. It might be the best interest of the fund. There's always, different considerations and incentives that could be misaligned. And then we just had we really wanted to build a real business, which is profitable and not rely on some sort of paper valuation from some VC money that nobody really cares as much about and feels comfortable kind of like burning. So it's almost, I feel like if you're building a bootstrap brand and growing it profitably, it's almost like you have no other choice but to grow it profitably, because where's the money going to come from otherwise? So it really forces you to pressure test that your business is a legit business and not some sort of you made it work with burning cash.
How do you think about, if you're like a newer brand, sub 20 million in revenue per year, what are the things you would focus on to achieve that break even? Like, it sounds like you guys go very deep, and maybe that's because your volume is super high, or maybe even at lower volume you'd go, the same lengths down to returns and payment providers and, transaction fees per provider. What would your advice be to somebody who's doing less than 20 million in terms of the things that they should probably prioritize over, something like a new website design or A/B testing button colors, things like that?
Right. So for us, the top value of the company we coined is move the needle. And it's a moving thing because the needles change at different points of scale. So if you're earlier on, you really need to think about for yourself in that $20 million business hypothetically, what are the biggest needles, right? So for example, if you're trying to sit down with your vendors and negotiate COGS, which product makes the vast majority of your SKU base? I bet there is a product or a category that's making, the 80-20 rule, right? And it's that's my hero product. Every cent you move on that, it's gonna make a big difference. right? And it can move in the sense on like what are you actually paying to your vendors, but it can also move in the sense of like give me longer payment terms so I can pay less of interest on whatever debt I incur to get the inventory. But like sit down with that vendor. That's a strategic conversation to be had on like, I'm looking to scale my business, work with me, right? As you scale, they will give you better terms. Next thing is probably outbound shipping, right? That's a big item. What can you do around that? How can you optimize your logistics? How can you get fast, like basically closer to your customer so it gets there faster and cheaper? If you change that, that changes again your unit economics. You can acquire more, right? And then all of you marketers in the room, there's a lot to be done around that, right? And you really need to think about every line in that P&L essentially, and how do you think about that in the context of your marketing so you are able to spend. For example, I mean, everybody talks about AOVs and stuff, but if you are able to change the AOV, you're changing your order economics, all of a sudden you have more CAC you can afford to generate those orders. What can that be? It's not just, I mean, the hooks of the world, right, and landing pages and all the great CRO work, but it's also like strategically, like what should be your offer? What product? Should you bundle things together? Can you offer a better discount to your customers if you did? Should you offer, I don't know, other complementary like upsells, cross-sells, post-purchase, upsell, whatever, right, to just generate healthier product orders. And with that, you have more budget, and with that, you can start scaling again. So it's constantly looking at those drivers and thinking essentially outside the box on like not just what's easy and everybody else is doing, but like what can you potentially do and what need to be true in order for you to bump up your average order value, which by the way, I don't think is revenue. I think it's the average contribution profit. That's the real value of the order, right? And so how can you make that higher so you can have more money? If you have more money to spend, you can scale, and so on and so forth.
And okay, so I think most people, when they think about launching products on a site or re-merchandising their site, a lot of people think about an Excel sheet with the product cost, the COGS, the pick and pack, shipping, and then compared to what a customer pays. How do you guys think about that? I imagine your point of view is thinking through, okay, somebody comes in from a Facebook ad, which means we show them this bundle. Then there's an upsell, there's a post-purchase, there's this and that. How do you think about that journey? Or like, when you guys are launching something new, how do you think about the journey of building that customer's highest contribution margin?
Yeah, it's a great question.
What are the different levers in there?
It's a great question, and I wish I told you we had it all together. We don't. We really don't, just to make everybody feel comfortable in this room. Like, we are all figuring this out as we speak. But at the highest level is taking all those items that go into account and understanding the categories. So I'll give you an example. One of the things we launched not so long ago was jeans. And one of the things we learned about jeans, we were a t-shirt brand, and we learn as we go about all the different categories, is especially when people buy it online, they tend to buy multiple sizes, and then they tend to return the ones that don't fit them as well. So a jean order might come on the upfront saying, wow, this is actually a really high AOV because someone buys 3 pairs upfront. But if majority end up keeping only one, you got to really like heavily discount that actual revenue from what you're going to net out with that particular type of order. And so you go deep into different categories and you start understanding the behavior. And then maybe at that point when they did do that, do you then try to upsell them on a 3-pack of jeans in their size and try to kind of like do a retention play around that? I think that when you talk about product development, we start always with the TAM, just understanding like, I'm a big believer of like blue ocean strategy. If you go out there and you're good and you're playing in a big market, good chance you're going to win, right? And so what is that TAM? How many people need that? Are you solving a real problem? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? For us earlier in the shirt, it was really about boosting people's confidence and creating a shirt that fits them well. We're really, really good at nailing that fit. And when shirt fits you well as a guy, you feel confident, you feel a high sense of kind of like self-esteem, and you love it, right? And so what is the problem with jeans? What is the problem with whatever category you might actually kind of like go about? And how do you effectively solve that, right? Lead with that customer empathy is something we're really big about. And that also helped dictate some of those decisions. And then, of course, everything you mentioned on the surface, it's just that certain things don't vary as much. So, for example, payment processing fees, pick and pack, outbound shipping, all of those things, we negotiate them as a business, but they don't really kind of like flow into individual product decisions. With the product decisions, it's more about the size of the problem, the size of the prize, if you will, and our ability or belief that we can solve that effectively, and then from there kind of like iterating. And we won't go kind of like into something big. We will test it. We'll order a quantity we feel very confident that we'll be able to sell through. And then from there, start kind of like replenishing and growing the categories.
Amazing. And last question. One thing you've talked about before is assets on the balance sheet, and one of those assets being email addresses and phone numbers.
And app downloads.
Yes, app downloads. Could you just talk about how do you calculate that value, and how do you value them?
Yeah, of course. So I do believe there is a lot of other kind of like intangible assets, and the reason I know that for a fact is when we ask people post-purchase, when did you first hear about us? Very small percent say today, right? And that's when they make their initial purchase. And by small percent, I mean sometimes like single digit, right? So there is a lot happening in this like mid-upper funnel it's harder to put your finger on. And there's different types of assets. There is the number of email addresses, there is the number of text or phone numbers, there is the number of app users you have on your app. There is also like things that are even less tangible, like the number of people that you reached with your ads or that are aware of your brand, right? And it's all sitting there in what I consider like marketing potential or business potential. It's not yet converted, but there is value there. And what you do as a marketer is you convert cash, start spending it, in building this marketing potential or building this business potential, and that hasn't been capitalized on yet, right? But there is value there. And so what we're trying to do is figure out like what is the unit value of each item, right? So as an example, if we're thinking about email, and I'm thinking, and we're still working through this, what is the value of an email address? Well, let's look at the contribution profit per average customer whom we have their email or don't, right? And let's start running this idea of like, if we have someone's email, like how much extra contribution profit do we get per email, individual email on the file, and then we have a number on it. Same idea for the SMS, same idea even within it, right? And we're gonna talk later with retention.com, but every flow, set up a holdout test, right? You can hold out from the welcome flow 5% and just see like what happens had I not run them through my welcome flow. And now you start understanding like what is the value of my welcome flow? What's the value of the first like message within the welcome flow. So you can start putting value on everything you do, and that becomes powerful because now you understand, okay, so if I send people paid to my site, and conversions are easiest to measure because it's coming right there and then, but do I know how many email signups did I get? Do I know how many SMS signups did I get? Do I know how many app downloads did I get? Do I know how many whatever did I get? And how much each of those are worth? Then you can start building numerical calculations on like, what is the total value created for that spend, some of which may not come here right there and then, but it will be more like a residual impact that is going to be kind of like coming to fruition later on. I can't tell you we're doing it like perfect science, but that is the approach and how we're trying to quantify everything we do.
Amazing. Ben, that's all the time we got. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.